we are here today with Supervisor Marion Ashley, and thank you so much for joining us, and want to kind of walk through what shaped your views in politics or your interest in public policy and politics, and just kind of walk through that. You've had a long, wonderful career and a lot of history here in Riverside County, so kind of want to talk about that a little bit as well. So if you don't mind, starting from the beginning, where were you born?
I was born in Loma Linda, California. We lived in Nuevo, and they were born at Loma Linda Hospital. So I'm a native of Riverside County, but I was born in San Bernardino County.
Yeah. So where were your parents already here? Grandparents, parents? Who came first to the area?
Well, my father came here in about 1927 from Texas, along with some cousins, and then to work in the farms. He was a farm worker. So he was here in the 20s. My mother's family came from Del Rio, Texas, by wagon train.
Wow.
Literally, by horse and wagon, buggy, with some other families, including the Moss family, Moss Motors family, to Blythe, California. And they were farmers, and they farmed there for a while, and they had these horrendous floods. There was no Boulder Dam then. So when you had a big rainstorm on the Colorado River, it flooded out all the low-lying land in the Palo Verde Valley. So after one flood, they were standing up on the bluffs above, looking out over the valley, and said, "There's no future for us here with these floods." So they turned and immigrated over to Nuevo and farmed there.
How long had they been here before you were born?
Well, they showed up in the Blythe area about 1910, and there was 12 brothers and sisters. The oldest sister was Margaret Tatum, my grandmother, and she married Wiley Ivy of the Ivy family, Ivy farming family in Blythe, who were there long before we showed up. Okay. And my mother was orphaned because the marriage broke apart, and had two children. And my mother was raised by Marion Tatum, who was the oldest brother of that 12-member clan, and is just like his daughter. So that's where I got my name, Marion. I'm named after my uncle, who is my de facto grandfather. And
what's your earliest childhood memories of growing up? Was it on a farm then, or?
Well, we grew up on a farm. My mother and father, met in Nuevo, and got married, and I was born, like I say, born in Nuevo, and my dad, was a farm worker. He worked for farmers, and helped plant crops and take care of the crops and harvest them and so forth. So we ended up from my early stage, we were always working in farming. We were always involved about harvesting potato crops or onion crops, and the family also did dry land grain farming. But primarily, I remember growing up in the culture. It was all centered around growing and harvesting and distributing potatoes and onions. That's how I grew up. That's what I thought I was going to be doing all my life. I thought I was going to be a farmer.
Yeah. Is your first house where you lived still around?
No, it was in Nuevo. It's
flattened and
it's flattened and gone. And also the house where my brother Mike was born, it's no longer there. And in fact, we lived in several houses in Nuevo, and one burned down, and the other two have been destroyed, and other houses built in their place.
Because there couldn't have been a lot of people around then, and I mean, what was around? What cities do you remember were incorporated at that time?
Well, there was a lot of people around. To give it an idea, I figure there's probably between, you take Moreno Valley, we farmed, and our family farmed in the Nuevo Paris Valley, Moreno Valley, and down in the Menifee, Romaland area, which is part of Menifee now. And I figure right now there's probably less than 500 people, probably less than 100 if you want to be actual, but for certainly less than 500 people that live in the Moreno Valley, the greater Paris Valley, and the Menifee Valley that were there before my wife and I. They're still alive. They're there. So we're probably in the 100 survivors of people who actually were born there and
Wow.
still live there.
So, where'd you go to high school?
Went to Paris Union High School.
Was it a relatively new high school then?
No, it was been around since the 1880s.
Wow.
And the high school had moved to a new location. It was downtown somewhere, and my mother went to that school, and I had some of the same teachers my mother had. And the English and Spanish teachers, Miss Werner and Miss Day, were the very same teachers my mother had.
Wow. So do you remember politics at all being part of your family life? Was it talked around the
My
house?
mother was political. She was very interested in politics. My dad, he was working hard. He wasn't worried about that so much. My mother really followed politics. And I remember, when as a teenager, we'd have political meetings over at the Williams family residence. He was the family that owned the buses, that drove the buses for Paris High School and some of the elementary schools. And the politicians would come visit over there, and we would go over and listen to them. And I remember meeting with Congressman Singh over there, the Democratic congressman from out of the Imperial Valley, who was our congressman way back when, and many others coming through there. And we went to rallies in Paris, for a Democrat.
So your mom was a Democrat?
And I was a Democrat then too.
Yeah.
I later switched.
So your mom was when you grew up then, who was the first president that you remember?
Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
Okay, so
He was the president when I was born.
So your mom was a New Dealer.
And I was born in 1935. And my mom was, the country was in such horrible shape. And Roosevelt just happened to be the right man for the job. He came and he really saved our country. And he's one of the greatest presidents ever because of what he did to bring us out of the recession and then fight World War II and win it.
Did you have any relatives that fought in the war?
Yes, my uncle and I had two uncles and a bunch of cousins. My dad had a problem with his knee, and they wouldn't take him. He actually, when the war started, we moved our family up to Bishop, California, to be that's where by that time my uncle Marion Tatum and Elsie lived in Bishop. They'd retired and moved up there, and he moved us up there next to them so they could take care of us while he was going to go join the Army. And then they didn't accept him because of an injury, and he had a heart murmur or something as well. So he worked in the vanadium mines and a truck driver, and then eventually there was a big farming operation wanted to hire him to be their foreman. So we
back down here?
Actually we went to Nevada for about 2 years, and he farmed there, and then from there we moved back to Nuevo, for a while. Farm there, and then members of the family, the Tatum family, my mother's family was the Tatum family, a real active, large family. And two of the brothers, actually three of the brothers, went up to Victorville, California. They were able to acquire a lot of land from the railroad up there. One of the railroads was selling off surplus land, and they went up and bought and leased hundreds and hundreds of acres up in the Victorville, Hesperia area, and they farmed in Hesperia. So we moved to Hesperia. My dad was a foreman for the Tatums up there. And at that time, there's 50 people lived in Hesperia, 50. And now there's, maybe 150,000?
Wow.
So we're actually, pioneers to Hesperia. We lived there, and that's when Roosevelt died. We lived there when the war was over, when we finally finished World War II, and we celebrated with fireworks out there.
You went to college where?
I went to college at Riverside City College.
So stayed here.
Riverside, and I played basketball. I was the captain of the basketball team. And the second year I was the starting point guard.
So what year did you graduate from high school?
Graduated high school in 53. I went to Skadron College of Business for 1 year and got a bookkeeping certificate. And then I entered Riverside City College. I wanted to play basketball, and I got a business management degree there, and then transferred to San Diego State and graduated from San Diego State in 1958.
Okay, so what was going on? Were you following politics then?
Oh yeah, I was very active at that time. I was very actively following politics, and I was very active. I was a Democrat then.
Yeah.
And following that, and the JFK election, and that was big for us. And that particularly, I married into an Irish family, Irish Catholic family, Mary Ashley. We got married in 1955. Been married 63 years, and they were all excited because of John F. Kennedy.
Yeah.
And that was
first Catholic
first
president.
Catholic,
Yeah. And when you were starting to, what was your first professional job?
Well, my first professional job, I went to work for the Tatum Construction Company up in Victorville, and I moved from down here just out of college, and we moved to Victorville, and I worked part-time in the accounting department and part-time in the construction department, working for the man in construction. I was just a runner. I'd run bids and plans, and I'd write contracts, and he taught me how to write contracts. And then the company really expanded, and we were building a lot of homes, and I got the choice. They asked me that I could be the controller, or I could be in charge of the building houses, be the contract manager. I chose the houses, so that was more fun. And basically we had 1 year we built 326 houses, another year 150, which is a lot of houses even now. And we were very, very, very active in the building associations and all that. And then we had a recession, and then things really went down. And at that time, the CPA, that was the chief financial officer for Tatum Construction, decided that he wanted to go into private practice and recommend I take his place. So I ended up the chief financial officer of this company, which was in real trouble, and that was fun. And
well, did you get him out of trouble?
We made it through. While I was there, I said, "Hey, it looks like I'm going to be an accountant my whole life, so I might as well be a CPA." So I went down to USC on weekends. Keep in mind, I've got 6 children by then. Okay, so we're pretty active. And every Saturday, I drove down to USC and took a course from a man named Dr. Mosich, Andrew Mosich, who's the one that tutored all the prime candidates for CPAs from USC, UCLA, and all those surrounding universities. I've been out of college for some time, and I'm down there about 7 years. I'm down there competing with those guys with master's degrees right out of college.
Yeah.
So I took the CPA test, passed 2 parts the first time, which was amazing, and then the next 6 months I took the other half and passed that and become CPA.
So was Mary in favor of that, or is she saying, why do you keep leaving 6 kids here?
Well, it was a little tough because when that 6 months, all I did is I drove down there on Saturday and then back. And then during the week, when I came home from work, I just walked right up the stairs to our bedroom where I had a desk and all my materials, and I sat right down there and started working problems, and they brought my meals to me. The kids wanted to see me. They came there, and I stayed there up as long as I could stay awake. I did that every night until I passed that test.
You have good focus then.
Yeah.
Good concentration.
And if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have been able to pass the test. That's for sure.
So when did you I know you worked for, I think you said, one of the wealthiest persons in the United States at that time?
Well, after that, I worked for the CPA firm for several years. You have to work 2 years to get your certificate. And I did that, but while I was working for the CPA, Pete Marwick Mitchell downtown Los Angeles, which is the largest CPA firm in the entire country then, and since then they merged with another company and formed KPMG, which is the largest in the world. And after that, I had an offer to go work for a company called Princess Properties, which was owned by Daniel Ludwig, who was then the richest man in the world. There was about
How did he make his money?
He made it. He was a tanker tycoon during. he was a mechanical genius. Didn't go to college. Had a degree from a correspondence course in mechanical engineering while he was working on a ship in the Great Lakes in the engineering department down in the boiler room. And then he went into business for himself. He leased a barge and made some money off that. And then he got interested in ocean-going shipping, and he worked his way into that. And then he bought this little shipyard in New Jersey to make ships. And World War II started, and then they would buy anything he could build. They bought, the government bought, and he was a genius. He came up with the rivetless method for building ships. They used to have rivets.
Yeah.
He came with spot welding, and he designed these Liberty ships. And after the war was over, they didn't know, what are we going to do with these ships? So they sold them back to the people that build them for about 5-10 cents on the dollar. He bought all his shipping back. World War II was over, and he had more shipping capacity, tonnage, than any man in the world, and no ship was over 7 years old.
So he turned it into cargo then?
And then he just started making money. What did he hauled? He hauled oil. Especially was hauling oil. And he designed the modern supertanker. They called the Bantry class tankers because of the deep water in Bantry, Ireland, is where they unload, and all the oil is distributed to Western Europe through there. And
do they still do that? Do you know? Is that
they're still doing it.
Yeah.
Doing it now. They've built, since he built them ships, 326,000 deadweight tons before you load them up. And what he came up with this idea that he would go over to Chevron or somebody like that in Texaco, and he would get a contract to haul their ships. He would say, here's the ship. I'll go wherever you want. It just costs you so much a day. Give me a contract for this, and we're your ship. Wherever you want to go, whatever you want to haul, we haul it. And he did that, and then he'd take that contract over to the bank, and they'd loan him money because he had Chevron, in effect guaranteeing his loan.
And then he could expand.
And then he would go,
there.
and without putting any money up, he'd build the ships, and they would pay for themselves over time. And eventually, all these ships paid for themselves. He had so much money, he didn't know what to do with it. And if you brought it back to the United States, he had to pay taxes on it. So he started investing it offshore and all over the world. He bought cattle ranches, coal mines, hotels, land developments, did everything. I came in as the chief financial officer of his hotel and land development division offshore, and eventually became the chief operating officer of that.
Did you have to move to do that?
Yeah, I had to move to Bermuda to do that because I had to live offshore for the tax purposes. So that was really a big sacrifice, having to move to Bermuda and live there for several years.
So did he invent one of the first Bermuda tax shelters, or what?
Well, he just exploited what was there, and he already had a hotel there called the Princess Hotel, and we were building a separate hotel called the Southampton Princess. And
how long were you there?
I lived there several years, and then
wait, was Mary and the kids out here?
Yeah,
then,
no, we're all living there together, and along with my whole staff. I took my whole staff there, which includes Joe Kubler.
Oh God, I didn't know Joe worked
he was
there,
my chief. He was my director of internal auditing.
And how many years did you say?
Yeah.
How many years there?
We lived there between 2 and 3 years.
How did the kids remember it much?
Oh yeah.
How old was the oldest then?
The oldest one was in high school. The youngest one was just starting school.
Did they enjoy it?
Oh, they all enjoyed it. It was very pleasant memories for them. Yeah, it was really, really good for him. And we were lucky they couldn't find a house for us there. Mr. Ludwig had this house on quite a bit of acreage, 7 acres or so, and he owned it, and he never used it. So he just said, "Well, wait, why don't you live in my house?"
That's great.
So I was living in his house, and that was really, really great. And we enjoyed that. But then my Uncle Charlie Mott, visited us there a couple of times, and he said, it's great working for Mr. Ludwig and all that, but he was trying to talk me into coming back here. And by that time, I'd changed jobs there. I was still living in Bermuda when I became director of financial planning for Mr. Ludwig for his whole empire. And the gentleman that I worked for, he had taken over control of the company, and he brought myself and brought his crew with him. And I applied for the job and got it. I was monitoring a lot of companies, and I evaluated any of their building projects we're going to build, what their internal rate of return, the payback period, whether we should do it or not. I was sort of watching, monitoring the investments.
And you were still in Bermuda then?
Yeah, I still live in Bermuda, and I was still running Princess Properties on the side.
Oh, okay.
So we did that, and then my uncle said, "You got to come back here and to Paris and work here." He says,
what was attractive about that?
Well,
thought?
There's the attractive. He says, if you work for Mr. Ludwig, it's going to be fun and exciting, but you're never going to really acquire any wealth. And he says, you come back here and work for yourself, and you'll be back with your family, and you can have a chance, to be a bigger success. I thought about it, and we were going to have to move to New Jersey. We'd actually bought a house there in Ridgewood, New Jersey, and we decided to say no to all that and come back to Paris. So I left that job there, and they were asking me, please stay another year or two. And I said, nope. If you're going to go, you're going to go. So I came back here and went to work for myself, and it wasn't easy.
Doing what?
Well, basically, I was did a lot of things, but over the years I've been a land investor, investments. I had real estate services. We had owned about 6 Century 21s at one time. We had a commercial brokerage firm called Ashley Cronky, and then I served on the bank board of Valley Bank in Moreno Valley for 25 years. The last 10 years as chair before we sold it.
And were you? Do you remember who was on the board of supervisors then?
Yeah, I remember back when it was Norton Younglove was the 5th district. So just as I returned back, Norton Younglove had just won election, and as supervisor, he'd served 24 years after that. And later on, I became his planning commissioner. So I served on our county planning commission for 8 years. You had Don Schroeder, Al McCandless, and people like that. And then later on, Kay Sanaceros was on the planning commission with me, and she left the planning commission and ran for county supervisor and won. She served for 16 years, just like me. So it's unbelievable. But two of us on the same planning commission both got elected. We both served 16 years, but not together.
Yeah. So did your politics start to change a little bit?
My politics changed when I came back from Bermuda. When I was back in Bermuda, about that time, it's 1972. We had the McGovern was running against Nixon, and I looked at McGovern and what he was saying. I said, "My God!" I said, "I can't believe I can't support any of that." I realized I was just completely out of step with what the Democratic Party is, how it had evolved. It evolved to, I thought mainstream party were concerned about the defense. They were more in business, as well as the underclass and the working man. And these things, they just sort of evolved away from me, and I became a Republican.
Was part of the Vietnam War was you were just coming back and it was winding down. It was probably a lot of protests and so on.
Yeah, that wasn't a factor in my decision, but I was very supportive of I voted for Lyndon Johnson, and I thought, other than the Vietnam War, he did a fabulous job. He came along at a time when our country was fractured and getting over the assassination of John F. Kennedy, and we had all the civil rights problems that were just brewing, and the country was in turmoil, and he just did a masterful job in that period. Except for the Vietnam War, he would have been one of our greatest presidents, except for the Vietnam War. That killed couldn't run for a second term, and it actually killed him physically. Yeah,
and he was he was from Texas also, obviously, so he's kind of had a connection to you there. And
that was the last Democratic presidential candidate I voted for.
So literally, the McGovern-Nixon campaign
made me a Republican.
You know what's interesting about that is I don't know if you ever followed him afterwards. He turned, I don't know if he actually became a Republican, but he said, more or less, I disavow a lot of positions I had back
man,
then.
he was
Because he became a businessman. I think he bought like a hotel bed and breakfast or something like that.
No, I didn't realize that.
Yeah,
but he lived. But he was a he was a good man, and he served in the armed services and honorably, and I just didn't agree with him politically, philosophically.
Yeah, he said he says. I think basically his message was there's too many regulations and it's too hard to start a business.
Yeah.
And he kind of said the Democrat Party's gone the wrong way on this, and that was like in the I think late '80s or something like that.
Well, they have. It's we are really regulated to death, particularly here in California. But that's everything has its momentum, and eventually that'll smooth out and evolve out over time.
Mm-hmm. So when you were before you were on the board of supervisors, you decided to run for the water district, Eastern Municipal?
Right. I've been a planning commissioner. I served 8 years. Then I stepped down from that because I was just so busy with my job and my investments and I was concerned about a conflict of interest then too. And I decided it's best I leave and concentrate on my business. And what was the question then?
Well, when did you decide to run for Eastern Municipal?
Well, what happened? John Kaduris was our director, and he'd served for 20 some odd years. And Eastern Municipal Water District is really important. They're the one that brought the water into our area to keep our farming alive, and it made it possible for us to all the growth we've had. It was the water that they brought in when they joined the Metropolitan Water District, and also they built the first sewage treatment plants out there, which made it possible to have urban growth, like the Sun City development, for example, came in about then. So Mr. Kaduris, John Kaduris, a good friend and associate of ours, one day walked in and said, I'm quitting. I'm not going to run. And so he had some time. There's some time to serve out on his term, and they took applications over at Eastern. And I interviewed with some couple other people, and the board chose me to serve out about a year left in Mr. John Kaduris' term, and he was actually he was very sick and ill and died a few years later. That's why he basically stepped down. And then a year later, I ran for my first time. I ran for a public office, and I think I won 66% of the vote. And
so was it a competitive race?
It was. It wasn't that competitive. I won. It's about like my supervisor races. I won all of them 2-1.
Let me rephrase that. So did you know your opponents? Did you know who they were?
Oh yeah. I knew him, and he was the water district base. It wasn't real like running for supervisor.
Yeah, but sometimes water issues can get very contentious sometimes, but it was not a contentious race.
Well, it wasn't. Then I was elected 2 other times. So I was elected water board, won 3 elections there. And Eastern's unique, and people sort of overlook special districts and water districts, the importance of them. Yeah. And we were, I was representing, close to 100,000 people.
Wow!
And the largest city in the district was Moreno Valley, with just a little over 100 then, and they had like 150,000, and they're in the district, so each member there represents 30,000 people. And then the largest city, other than that, was 30,000 people, and that was like Paris and Banning. So here I represented more people directly than any of those council people. So I ran against all those council folks. I wasn't. Our budget's far bigger than any of those cities, so I wasn't intimidated in the slightest by running against all these mayors and so forth.
So who were your opponents in your first supervisor race?
I ran against 3 mayors and a police officer, and I had Mayor Hunt of Banning, and then I had Mayor White and Bonnie Flickinger, Mayor Flickinger. One was mayor when the race started, and one became mayor after, and they both said they were mayor. And a police officer who lived in High Grove and worked in Palm Springs, and whose brother was the mayor of San Jacinto, a politically active family and a knowledgeable family, the Williams family.
Yes, Patrick Williams, right?
Patrick Williams.
Yeah, I remember that.
And Mayor Hunt from Banning. And we had the primary, and in the primary I won, and Mayor Hunt had the support of the Morongo Band of Mission Indians, so I give you an idea. And I went out, and I'd been around a long time, knew a lot of people, and I worked real hard and got basically every endorsement worth getting I had, and I raised far more money than anybody else, and I just sort of sucked up all the air. So I won 1/3 of the votes in the primary, and everybody else got roughly 1/6. And the police officer beat Bonnie Flickinger by 22 votes for second place. I ran against, and that was dangerous because we just had 9/11, so police officers are like heroes.
Good ballot title.
Were and are heroes.
Yeah.
And I'm running against the police sheriff's deputy that was pretty well known, and I beat him 68-32.
Oh wow!
He campaigned really hard, and then I've had 3 other elections. The next election I won 65-35, and then third time I was unopposed, so I got 100%. And the fourth time I ran, I got 66% of the vote.
So when you ran or when you got elected, what were you focused on then? What did you see? What was the need in that district?
I was concentrating on our transportation, roads, traffic, public safety, and job production. We needed jobs. And
was it mostly a commuter area, or was it still phasing out of farming?
Let's say we're more farming then than now, because when I took office, we've grown by more than 650,000 people since I took office.
That's a lot.
And so we're 2.4 million, and we were about a little over 1.5 million then.
For the whole county.
For the whole county. And so we've grown quite a bit since then. So we're up to, we're almost 2.5 million now.
It's always a struggle, isn't it, when you have for transportation. I mean, you're a growing area, whether it's a city or a county, and you want to stay ahead of development, but it's almost impossible, it seems like.
Well, the way the things are set up, we're going to grow anyway, and if you don't do something about the roads and you plan, it's going to be even worse. You may not get quite as much growth, but it'll have even worse impact because you didn't plan for it. And Riverside County's done an excellent job of planning for it. When I was running, I was concerned about the main thing. It hasn't changed a whole lot. But then I maybe there might be a little different now. But mainly it was, we were really hurting. We needed jobs. We needed more roads and highways and interchanges and corridors. We needed the public safety was a big concern. So that's where I really drilled in on those 3 things. And in fact, I even come up with identified interchanges that then I would fight to get built. And I've been able to get them all done. The only one that isn't done is the one for the Highway 60-10 interchange we need over in Beaumont, which right now would probably cost $750 million to build that. But we are attacking
That'll never
that.
happen.
Yeah, it'll happen.
You think so?
It'll happen. It's not going to happen now.
Yeah. Where exactly are you talking about?
Well, right here in Beaumont, where Highway 60 and 10 and Highway 79 all come together, and plus the railroad tracks are there.
Yeah.
It's just a situation not much different than when we built this big overpass and this big development here in Riverside, and we did the big highway. It would be a very similar situation to that, and it would be very costly because you're having to go over the railroad tracks.
Yeah, will you do a bypass?
And these things don't come together perfectly. It would be massive. It would look like something out of Star Wars. And it's not going to happen for a long time, but it will happen. But we're attacking it other ways. We have, the Potrero bypass, and we're trying to get ways to get the traffic around that and take the pressure off of it. And so there's been a lot of progress being made, and despite that, since I've been in office, we've built 1,850 new jail beds. Now you think, well, where would we be? Including the 1,250 that we've built in Indio that'll open up in a few months.
Mm-hmm. So, what are some of the tools that have changed in your time as far as funding, particularly for transportation, as far as fees on development for flood control or for habitat and so forth?
Okay, let me back up a little
Sure.
bit. And then one thing, when I came on board, there had been a project authored by my predecessor, Tom Mullen, it was just a marvelous idea, and he just deserves all the credit in the world. It was called the Riverside Integrated Project, and that would have been started several years before I came on. During the election period, this was developing, and the plan is to create new corridors. To start with, they come up with the new general plans for the county and all the cities, which was accomplished, and then to build a series of corridors, east, west, north, south, to carry the traffic in those general plans, and then 2 huge habitat conservation plans to mitigate that plan. No one had ever done that ever before, except one city, about 100,000 people had done that for that city. No one had ever done this on a large scale.
So let's explain the importance of that for a second, because it really is important. When you say habitat plan, because going back, particularly, you're talking about, well, it was early 2000s then, but from the 90s to early 2000s, there was a lot of consternation with the kangaroo rat and these endangered species in the area where you couldn't build anything. You couldn't clear brush for fire either. And so
we had two, the K-rat here in the west and the fringe-toed lizard in the desert, which is holding up every interchange down there. No of those interchanges we see now, none could be built because of the fringe-toed lizard. In the kangaroo rat, there was a habitat plan formed to take care of the kangaroo rat, and they were paying $500 per parcel to start out with. But that didn't solve the problem. They didn't want to have another kangaroo rat come along or another fringe-toed lizard. So the idea was to have these habitat plans. And I say massive. The one in Riverside County comprises 5/12 of all the land in western Riverside County is in this habitat plan, about 5/12. In the desert, about 7/13 of all the land is in the will be in the habitat plan.
And because your district crossed both those regions, you were involved in both those habitat plans.
Both habitat plans. So I came on board. I've been going to all those meetings, and there's been thousands of meetings held out there, and I've been attending all those, preparing myself. When I came on board, the board put Supervisor Tavaloni and I in charge of that project. It wasn't finished. It was just underway. And there were some folks who were having doubts about it.
But let's back up for a second. What are you accomplishing when you make a habitat plan, which really was a new thing? What was the goal there?
It's great to have a general plan. Just say you're going to develop this area and put all these businesses and people there. It's great to say you're going to build corridors, road corridors, and highways. But then you get ready to build them, you have to do environmental impact reports. And these environmental impact, you have to do a separate one for each one. Every time you have to handle each thing individually. It's on its own. And by these habitat plans, we were going to mitigate the general plans and these corridors and these highways of all these species. So if any of those species are involved, they're automatically already have a plan that's already covered. You just follow the plan.
And you're putting open space aside to account for that habitat, right?
Yeah, in the desert, that we had the fringe-toed lizard plaguing us down there. And so we were able to do that. It was tough, but with the leadership of John Tavaloni and myself, we finished that plan. On behalf of the board, we were the co-managers of that on behalf of the board, and we were able to complete that the habitat plan here in the county. And then we had the one in the desert. It was not done. It was really a fight, and we had City Desert Hot Springs. Didn't know whether they wanted to be in or out, and then we got ready to do the plan, all ready to finish it. Then they decided they wanted to be out. Then we had to go through the process because every city had to agree. One doesn't agree, you take them out of the plan. You have to do it over. We had it all ready to go again with them out.
And they did a U-turn.
And then they pulled an annexation up at some of the key land in the habitat land, which was northwest of Desert Hot Springs, up in the hills. And turned out to be a developer that was really was operating a fraudulent operation. No one knew it. He looked like king then, and had the city of Desert Hot Springs mesmerized. And they took that annexation through LAFCO. Nobody thought it would make it. LAFCO recommended against it. And guess what? They did their homework and they passed it. So, and this was quite a time. I says, I'd served on LAFCO 7 years before I came on the board, so I knew how LAFCO worked, knew most of the commissioners. And you have the right within 30 days or so, you can ask for reconsideration if you have new facts. So the county voted to ask for reconsideration, as did the Coachella Valley Association of Governments, and to LAFCO. And we had a new LAFCO hearing. It happened to be held down at the Eastern Municipal Water District, my whole stomping grounds. We went around and met with every LAFCO commissioner we could, explain what was going on. We did new studies on the economics of the plan and its land use, everything, all about it. We opened up the meeting. Larry Parrish, our CEO, said, open it up with the opening comments. We're going to here to protest this. Introduced me, and then basically I became like the prosecutor, and I brought up witness after witness to show that this didn't make sense. That the facts they've been given weren't true, and they've been lied to. And the LAFCO voted to reverse their decision and turn that down with a 5-2 vote. And you say, well, what does that mean? Well, what that meant is suddenly we have a habitat plan, and we're able to go out and start building every one of those interchanges out in the desert, every single one. Without that plan, we'd be lucky to have 2 of those done.
And let me put a finer point on it before we leave that, is that the reason why it was so important, and it's people that weren't around and don't get it, but there was a Southern California in this area was ground zero for a fight between environmentalists and developers.
Right.
And it was really, literally a nationwide problem that really bore out here. And the problem is environmentalists would rather you not build any homes or businesses or roads there. And most people are saying that's progress. We have more people moving in from Orange County and LA. We have no choice. They're going. Do you want it to be totally compacted with where people can't drive, or do you want to have logical growth? But to accomplish that, you needed to get both sides to agree. One side could not agree.
Right.
So you had to put a plan for that the environmentalists signed off on.
Right.
And developed. So that was the hard part. That's not easy work to get that done.
That was hard because no one here wants to see everything paved over.
Mm-hmm.
We want to preserve our open space, and we've preserved basically half of the developable part of the county has been put in permanent open space. So no matter how we build out, and we can build out, probably we could go up close to 5 million people here before we build out, and we're still going to have those open spaces. Half of this county is going to be in permanent open space, and those species are going to be protected.
And I think that was a model for a lot of other parts of the nation in the nation. It was really one of the first movers on that, wasn't it?
This is the first large one ever done, and Supervisor Mullen deserves huge credit for the authoring that, coming up with that idea, and his board then supported it, and then our future board supported it. But it wasn't an easy fight. We had to fight to get this done. A lot of work going. And like here in the western Riverside County, to get we were doing the habitat plan, we had to go out and get every city to vote for it. Every single one had to vote for it. And we didn't have much opposition. All we had was the Murdoch, Murdoch.
Development down by Lake Elsinore.
Yeah, he had the big development, Lake Elsinore. He was fighting it. The Farm Bureau was fighting it. The Prop 13, John Capel organization was fighting it, and some other, and the Riverside County Taxpayers Association, and every city would go to, you'd have the chief, the chief executive officer of Dole Foods, get up and talk, and then their attorney would talk, and then you would have the Farm Bureau, where everybody knew, talk against it. Prop 13, talk against it. They were spending money like over in Elsinore in a couple $100,000 to help elect friendly legislators, councilmen. Yeah. And we went over there, and on that one we thought, sure, that was really up for grabs. Well, one of the gentlemen that he talked to changed his mind, and they voted for the plan. He says he figured there's no chance that the Elsinore will be able to build anything and build out normally at all unless we were in a plan. Without a plan, it'd be great to have all this general plan that looked good, but you couldn't build it. So he figured actually we can do better and do a better job if we join it. And the guy figured it out, even though he was elected by
the other side.
Yeah, he did what was right for his community.
Yep, and that's like I said, that was a lot of work. So
That was
congratulations
and
on
we got that
all of you
one.
getting
And
that done.
my person, I went there. I went to Hemet. I went to Moreno Valley, to Paris, Banning, and Beaumont,
Yeah.
and Calamasa. I went to all three of those, and they all voted for it.
So
Yeah. Hemet was the worst one. They went 4-1, and my man is married to my cousin I grew up with. Is the only one that voted against the plan.
oh, really?
Yeah, my relative voted against me. I got the other 4 though.
So much for inside deals with relatives, huh? That's funny. So when you look back on during that time and however long you've been following politics, how do you think it's changed nationally, internationally, in a broader picture, or looking down? Where do you think we've come to? Where do you think we're going as far as a tone of politics or progression? I don't know. Tell me what you think. What do you see?
Well, you can see it everywhere that we're just keep polarizing more and more. We're very polarized right now at the national and state level, and that really hasn't happened at the local level yet. The local level, the folks, regardless of what party they're from, they're working for the benefit of their community, and they're not being ideological, and very, very few exceptions. So, but at state level and national level, it's getting more polarized all the time, and it doesn't matter how people come in, who support them or whatever. Once they see what the facts are and they see what we're up against, what we're working with, they tend to come to the middle. They tend to come and become problem solvers. So I've been very heartened by that, and I see the people that are running for elections, to take over board of supervisors. I see all those were people were basically problem solvers, and they would come in and try to take what we have and make it better, and they're not worried about getting a ideological edge. I'm not going to do this because I'm a Democrat or I'm this or that. They're basically just trying to make the county better.
Yeah.
I see that at local level, we're doing fine. It hasn't reached here yet.
And do you think we could ever push that up to the state or to the federal government? How do you get that feeling of compromise? And I guess it's just the nature of, you have 5 votes on a board, usually in a city, so you have no choice but to compromise. I mean, unless it's totally dysfunctional. But when you get to Sacramento, there's 80 assembly members, Congress 435 House members. Do you think it's possible to find that type of forced compromise there?
It's possible, but it's what's going to happen. The people are going to start quit following party lines, and you get like the Democrats are dominant. They dominate everything, but they're not all alike. They're not all. They don't all think the same way. There's different philosophies among them, and they're going to start polarizing within their party and form new voting combinations, and eventually you're going to have a more of an open thing. It'll happen. It's starting to happen a little bit now. So I think you'll see that the Democratic Party will start polarizing within itself, and they'll start you'll have to put groups together like it used to be in the old days. In the old days, we used to, in order to get anything done, you had to have everybody together. You had to have the farmers. The farmers could kill it. The farming community could kill anything. The environmentalists could kill anything. The business community could kill anything. Then the unions had a lot of strength. They could kill a lot. They all could almost by themselves stop something. But what's happening? You got so many of those have lined up together now that there's nobody around to stop anybody. Some of those folks like the Democratic Party, they've sort of pulled all of that together to win elections, and they're hanging together, and they're starting to do policies that may not necessarily be good for California. But I think that's going to, self-interest is going to take in different philosophies. I think you're going to see a breakdown of that and have polarization within the Democratic Party, and then you'll start seeing compromise again.
Where do you see Riverside County going? I mean, if you could look 20 years out, say, or pick a number, where do you see the county?
Well, I see that Riverside County is going to continue to grow, And 20 years from now, we'll probably have about 3.5 million people. And by 2050, we're going to have about 4.5 million people. We have a very good plan. We're ready. We've actually planned for it. Our water agencies, like Eastern and Western, are ready for it. They've planned way ahead for it. Metropolitan Water District's done a wonderful job, and I had the pleasure of serving on that board for a couple of years. Saw how they do things, and their integrated water planning, and they're ready for a drought, and they proved it. We had the big drought. They had plenty of water. We're planning for it. We're going to be able to grow, and we're going to grow in a pretty nice way. Politically, I think we're purple right now, and I think it could go either way right now in our county, depending on the issue and the candidate. I don't know how that's going to go as more and more people come out from the coastal areas. That'll probably we may get a little more blue.
What I've always admired about you is watching your staff over the years. You've mentored a lot of people, and you've mentored a lot of young men and women from the Hispanic community, and you seem to have made it a point to say we have to grow some young leaders here. Can you talk about your philosophy in that?
I think right now Riverside County is pretty close to half Latino, Hispanic, and over time it'll be more so. The voting power is not quite there yet, but it's going to grow each election period, and it'll be more and more important. And probably within another 8 years, I think the Latino vote, if it was monolithic, could be dominant. But just like every other group, they're not monolithic. They all have different philosophies and ideas, and there's business people and folks that think that way. So I think that doesn't necessarily mean, that there's going to be more Democrats, more Democratic votes. But I see the power is growing, and people really ought to pay attention to that, because it's important to nurture young Hispanic leaders right now, because they're going to be running our county here shortly. So it's best to pay attention and try to train and encourage promising young people, and encourage them to run. I've done that,
and
with some success and some not success.
That's what's encouraging for me to watch, is that you encourage folks in your office, people that have started right out of college and so forth, to say, hey, get out, get yourself involved in your community, run for office if you'd like. And I think you really hold up the aspiration of political office. You hold it to a high standard, and you say this is a good thing that you're involved in running for office.
Holding political office is an honorable thing to do, and if you want to help your community, you can't help it any more by serving in political office. That's the best way to help it, most effective way. And proud I've had the mayor of Coachella was on my staff. We had city council woman in Banning, and Brenda Salas, Darcy Kinsey, who's a councilwoman and one of the persons that helped launch the city of Menifee.
Yeah, and you mentioned Steve Hernandez was the mayor of Coachella.
Yes, and then we have Jaime Hurtado, my chief of staff, who ran for supervisor.
And is now president of
He's president of the Inland Empire Hispanic Leadership Council, and it still has and it has a lot going for him. I don't know, what Jaime is going to stay interested in politics or not, but he's got a lot to offer.
But it's really admirable that you've given young people the chance like that. So, looking back in your career, you've accomplished a lot. You had a good vision. You implemented. Any thoughts to pass on to your predecessor, which we're not exactly sure at this point who will be, but what do you think are the challenges they face maybe in their first term?
Well, whoever wins, they're going to have the same set of problems to face that the board has now. And the problem is, over the years, the state got into financial trouble. They started sucking money out of the county by realigning programs, and little by little, they've just sort of sucked the air out of us. And then The other big thing that hurt us is we had the Great Recession. For 8 years, or like starting 2008, we had this big drop in our revenue. Property taxes went down by by a fourth, just like that. We went from 800,000 discretionary revenue to 600,000 in 1 year, and stayed there basically, and for a while, and then we've gradually grown up, and finally this year, first time we've got back to 800,000, and people with the state, just slowly sucking money out of us through realignment programs, and also our revenue's down because of that. We wonder how in the world have we done as well as we have.
Yeah.
And people wonder how come you can't do this and you can't do that. So, but the good news is we've actually got it back there, and we're going to start growing forward. But the bad news is that we're going to have bad times eventually. When the state will realign some more money.
Yeah.
They just figure we're a creature of the state, and they figure what we have is theirs sometimes. And we have all these costs from the pension. The pensions costs are really a big deal right now. Something needs to be done. It's got to be done at the state level. It's got to be done by the electorate. It's hard to attack it individually. We did our run at pension reform, which has helped some, but still we're in the soup along with everybody else. Not as bad as most, but still we have problems. So people are going to have to deal with that. And we got the Affordable Care Act is still in place. That's Obamacare with a few changes. And I'm sure Congress will probably, and the President will probably tune that up and improve on that in the next few years a little bit. But it's there. It's actually, for our county health system, it's been a good thing. Some out in the business world, maybe it's not so good because of rising costs here and there. But it's good. It's actually good for the county health system, which is really proud of that. We've got a really well-functioning county system out there right now, and we have some problems with our family health care clinics that which we're addressing. But the hospital itself is functioning really well, and it's just going to get better with a new medical office building with 8 surgery centers, which will give us revenue opportunities we didn't have before. So I feel good about that, and the county's in pretty good shape. We got to just fight the finances to find the money to keep giving the services.
Or ask the state to quit taking it.
Yeah, we have, and we have pressure from our union brothers and sisters. Contracts are up. We're at an impasse with all of them, and they are wanting more from us than we have to give. And the new board is going to have to be wrestled with that. The next year, that's going to be one of their biggest challenges. Is that?
Well, I was going to say thank you for all your time, but I thought of one last story. If you can talk about, you have a lot of kids and you've had a lot of so there's a lot of careers and lives out there. But I can't remember which son it was that went to Africa though. And started a business and met his wife there. Remember?
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that real quick?
Well, my children are all doing well, and I consider them all very successful. But my youngest son, Kevin, he's more successful from at least a financial point of view than any of the others. And he, fresh out of college, he worked for a while and saved a little money because he wanted to travel the world. So he took the money he'd saved from working a couple of years, and he headed out and started traveling. And he was traveling, and he finally ended up in Kenya. That's one of his second trips he took. And he got low on money, so he said, well, Kevin's pretty resourceful. He said, I'll figure out a way to make some money here. So he looked for possibility of a job in Kenya, and he saw that the United Nations World Food Headquarters, which is in Kenya, right up in the Okeechobee Airport area, right next to the Sudan border, is hiring folks to help provide food to the Sudan. So he went up there and applied for that and got the job. So he's going into the Sudan delivering food, and with trucks with people, armed guards, with the permission of the local government. The Khartoum government would let him do that, which is Arabic dominated in Sudan. And then he says, you really can't get this food around. Get the food that people need it. How about those folks that the government won't let us go to? So he quit this job, went to work for a British nonprofit. They dropped him into the Nuba Mountains. He walked 250 miles or so around the Nuba Mountains and surveyed all their needs. Came back and went out through charities and charity work and putting on cultural shows, raised enough money and donations enough to take them supplies, including cloth and sewing machines, because they had literally it wore out all their clothes, and become very knowledgeable up there. Then he said, we can't get anybody to fly things up here. So he talked to a few friends. They threw their money together and bought a surplus plane from some South African company that was trying to get rid of it. It's like something like an old DC-3, but it was a South African made. And they started flying supplies in, and guess what? They're helping people. Guess what other thing they did? They're making money. So they bought some more planes, and they kept buying planes. Pretty quick, they got 12 planes. Before you know it, they're the largest doing that in that whole area. They're the dominant. Built their own little camp, little headquarters right there at the airport and everything. And so they're all doing that. Hey, we're making money. What are we going to do with our money? Says we can't go anywhere. We got to work. And they said, well, you can't get a decent cup of coffee anywhere in Kenya unless you go to one of the big international hotels. So let's build a coffee shop. Then they said, well, let's do a restaurant with it. So they went and built a restaurant called Nairobi Java House, and they started with one in an old burned out shopping center, and they cleaned it up. It's like going into an oasis to go to their place, and it just become successful. And then they built another one down in a shopping center. Then they put one at the transit lounge at the airport, and then one in the financial center. Pretty quick, they've got 12, 15 of them. They're the largest chain under one name in Kenya. Some outfit came and bought them out. And they wanted Kevin to stay and run it because he was the running of the thing. So he sold half his interests for millions of dollars. Made him wealthy. He's still there, still owns half of it. And their new group, he built it from like 12, 15 stores up to about 50, 60. And then another group came along, wanted to buy them out. So now he had another payday. So he's in his 50s and retired in Coronado, and he married a local girl in Africa. A wonderful, beautiful, sweet person, and great business mind, good education, and it helps him greatly. And they moved back here, and they're raising their kids. We have two children. My grandson going into high school, real good basketball player.
Yeah, I saw him at your retirement dinner.
Yeah,
He looked like he had the height for basketball.
My son Kevin was a real good basketball, and he's been teaching him, and he coached him there and took him to tournaments and things. Now we're back here. He's playing on these elite traveling teams out of San Diego, a couple of them, and he's starting high school this year. He made the varsity team as a freshman.
Wow.
He won't play a lot, but at least he's on it.
Yeah. Well, that's a great story.
So that's one thing I'm going to do in retirement is go watch those kids a little bit.
Have you been to Kenya?
Been to Kenya several times. Yeah.
What's your impression of it?
It's a wonderful country, and you go there. It's just my impression is I spent a lot of time in Mexico working for Mr. Ludwig, and we built the hotels and developments down there, and I was there a lot, and it had much in common. They had a election like every 5 years, every 6 years, and it's really fought. But once the guy wins, he runs the show, and they run the thing during their period of time. So they get their governments operate much the same, even though they're a different form. And I don't notice that people are walking all the time. And I notice in Mexico, all the people walking. People walk. They're both hard workers and very family-oriented, industrious. I thought it was like Mexico favorably. And I think a great deal of both countries.
Do you think Kenya has a good future?
It's got a bright future. It's just like it's a good place to go start a business. It it's like the new frontier,
That's great.
Kenya. It's a very business friendly place, and anybody who has a good idea there can go make money. Give you an idea, Nairobi, the capital, you think of it as 4 million people, and it runs. Nairobi is
Bigger than L.A.
It's big. It runs about from Riverside to Temecula. That's how long the city is. And
They're
it's
compacted then.
It's very congested. They don't
Yeah.
have a freeway system. And
Yeah.
Anyway, it's just a mess getting around there.
Well, Supervisor Marion Ashley, it's been a pleasure to work with you over these years and watch you and learn from you, and I know a lot of other people feel the same way. So thank you for all your great service, and wish you the best in your, I don't know if retirement's the right word, for your next phase of life. How's that?
A couple of new
You'll
phase.
never retire, I know.
Well, I'm going to try to
Know
keep
you well
active.
enough.
I don't know exactly what I'm doing, but I have a few ideas.
All right. Well, great. Well, thanks again. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoyed it.